Hey besties. First of all, I did think my setup would be nicer to look at if I was in front of the bookcase. It's not. The lighting in here is irredeemable. Like, it's only gonna get worse as the sun sets. I have no excuses, but I'm very excited because last year I made a total of one book video, which was midway through the year, kind of a recap tag on what I'd been reading for the first half of the year, and then at the end of the year I sat down and filmed a 3-hour long video of every single book I read that year, and then I could never upload it because I went to Disney World for 2 weeks in January and needed more storage and didn't edit it in time, so I had to delete the entire thing and never even saw the light of day, which was obviously disappointing as someone who has so much to say about every single thing I read. Like, it's an obsession. So I thought this year, to combat that, I will just every month talk about the books I've read that month, so I can talk about every single book, but not all at the end of the year when I can't physically speak for 4 hours. So you may be thinking, Maeve, you're already off to a terrible start. It's March now, so your plan has failed. Hear me out. As I said, in January I did go away for 2 weeks, so I didn't read much that month. And then last month I was in a bit of a slump, so I also didn't read that much. So I thought, I'm just going to compile the very small amount of books I did read into one video, which is this one. So this is the what I've read so far, January, February. This is gonna happen a lot. I do live next to the sea. Yeah, so this is gonna be January to February, what I've read in 2022. I was about to say 2023. We're just gonna jump right in. It's not gonna be super long. I've only read 4 books and DNF'd 2, which is always a great start. So yeah, let's just get into it. This first book I actually intended to read at the end of last year, and you'll hear why in a sec, because I thought it would be very funny to read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover at the end of the year. So it was like, it ends with this. Funny for who? Because no one, it's just like an inside joke with no one, but I didn't end up finishing it. I finished it in like the first few days of January instead, so it flopped. But yes, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is, I feel like at this point in like book communities on social apps, this book is like infamous at this point, which is why I wanted to read it, because everyone and their dog has an opinion on this book, and most of them are 5 stars, changed my life, one of my favourite books. Personally, didn't hit like that for me, but it wasn't terrible. It was a healthy 3 stars for me, and I want to get into why. So basically, if you don't know anything about this book, somehow, if you've never heard of it, this is about Lily, the flower shop owner, who meets Ryle. These names are incredible. And he is a big walking red flag, but she loves it. And his sister ends up working for her in her new flower shop. So she gets very intertwined with this family, even though she doesn't intend to. They end up in a bit of a romance. And this is not a spoiler alert. This is what the book is about and should be mentioned. It's about domestic abuse and the cycle of generational trauma within domestic abuse. And this is the first big problem with the book. It is not marketed that way at all. Like, I have heard so many people who are like, I start talking to them about this book and they're like, I literally had no idea it was about that. I thought it was just a romance book, because it doesn't say anything. It markets itself as a love triangle book, which it kind of is, but it's like, it's not a subplot, but it's just not the most important theme in the book. And Colleen Hoover has allegedly spoken out against the use of trigger warnings for her books, which I think is terrible, because I am not a victim of abuse. I am not someone who usually gets triggered by stuff like this, and this was hard to read. Like, this was really, really like intense at times. I feel like that has a lot to do with the pacing issues of the book. Like, it would go from being like a very boring, nonchalant conversation scene, and then like a rape would happen, like a flashback to like a rape or an intense violent scene, and it would come out of nowhere and it would make me feel like shit because I wasn't expecting it. And yeah, the pacing, I guess that was part of it, you know, these things come out of nowhere, but like for the sake of like readers like mental stability, you can chill it on that front. Also, in terms of the writing, because this book is so widely considered to be like a 5-star book, I was honestly expecting the writing to be a little bit better. Like, hear me out. I totally understand that this is, you know, a pretty good representation of what the cycle of abuse can be like, what it can feel like. But the dialogue, I don't think Colleen Hoover has ever spoken to another person. I don't think she knows what human interaction is, because every single person in this book speaks like a psychopath. Like, this is not a spoiler because this is the first chapter of the book. Ryle, that name still gets me. Ryle and Lily meet on a rooftop, and within their very first conversation, he is telling her about all of his trauma. They're kind of telling each other their trauma, and then he is like, I want to fuck you. I don't know about you, but I would run away. I started pissing myself laughing when this happened because they literally just met. Like, I cannot preface enough how they've been talking for maybe 5 minutes, and he looks her in the eyes, is like, I'm gonna fuck you, and she's not like this guy's a loose cannon. Like, the way he speaks, especially about sexual things, it was so painful at times. It was so painful. Even just every single character was saying things where I was like, people don't speak like this. Like, I understand books don't always need to be 100% realistic, but to this extent, like, I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I've literally not heard anyone else have that critique of this book, but it was the biggest thing for me. It was like, oh my god, the way they talk to each other is so cringe. For like and this is the thing as well, I was about to say for like a young adult, this is not a young adult. This is a traumatic adult story written kind of like a young adult story. Does that make sense? It didn't have an insane impact on me. It didn't, you know, evoke all these feelings of like, I never thought about it like that. Not that I know that much about it. These goals! This isn't like a 5-star delve into the nuances of domestic violence or what it's like to be in a domestic violent relationship or the trauma that passes down from domestic violence in families. Although it did touch on that in a way that I wasn't expecting to, that I thought was really cool. Again, it didn't feel like it said enough for me to be like, wow, that really knew what it was talking about. Hi everyone, I'm in the bathroom. I feel like I'm being really, really harsh on this book. Or like, I'm just not saying anything nice, which is not fair because I gave it 3 stars. Like, you don't just say terrible things about a book you enjoyed more than the half amount of stars. Because I did. I had fun with it, even though sometimes I wasn't taking it maybe as seriously because I was like, this is a little cringe. I did have fun with it. I enjoyed it. I got through it fairly quickly. So yeah, just wanted to say, because if anyone is watching who genuinely like was impacted by this book or really enjoyed it, no one wants to hear someone just go on and on about all the terrible things. The reason I feel like I had to was because I've not heard anyone say these things. Like, probably people have. I've just seen an echo chamber of how amazing this book is, how amazing Colleen Hoover is, and I don't really feel that way. So I did feel it was necessary for me to be like, and this thing, but in hindsight it's probably a little much. But I'm sorry. I am gonna let the rest of what I said play out because I still stand by what I said, but I also should be fair and be like, no, I do get it. I still had fun with it. Thank you for your time. Also, the love triangle bit was weird because the kind of like good guy of the story, he was still like a nonce. And again, I see no one talking about this. Like he met her when they were like kids. Like she was at least under 16. I think she was 15, and he was a couple years older than her, and they had sex. Bit creepy, and I was expecting the book to be aware of that. I gave like a really bad explanation for what I meant here, but basically what I meant was like, because she had grown up in a house with domestic violence, I thought maybe they were going to address like her relationship towards men was a little rocky, and like her only kind of safe relationship as a young woman was with this older guy. Like I really thought that'd be relevant. Like, doesn't that seem like that would have some sort of correlation? Like he was just older for no reason, because it was never anything. And I was like, that's just so weird. Like, I don't like this guy. Why did he like have sex with like a kid? And like he was not like an adult. He must have been like she was like 15, he was like 17 or something like that. But it's still weird. I stand by it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to just shit on this book, but I have a lot of problems and I've had no one to talk about this with. Another thing, the characters, they had no personality. There was nothing to them. The main character literally couldn't tell you one personality trait that she had. Like, she wasn't even like deeply damaged by the things that happened to her. Like, those things didn't seem to mold her personality in any way, or her choices or anything. Like, she was a shell of a person, and every character was the same. Ryle's only personality was that he was a dick, and like also a nurse, and he always wore scrubs, which as a lesbian reading this book, that did nothing for me. Her best friend / co-worker is just rich. Her only personality trait is being rich, which pissed me off, because I was like, why are you hiring someone who just has a job for fun when you can hire someone who needs a job? And every character was like that, where they were just kind of like a shell of a person with a very, very brief personality. Which, again, I wouldn't feel so strongly about these things if this wasn't so widely considered to be like a 5-star, like amazing book. I still gave this book 3 stars. So please don't think I hated it entirely. I feel like I'm hardly in the frame. Is that better? I'm like still hardly in it. Oh, I don't know if that's any better. I feel like I might have actually made the lighting worse. I might have made everything worse. But anyway, yeah, I still gave this book 3 stars. Like, please don't think I absolutely hated this book. If you love it, I actually understand why this is widely received, because it is, I was about to say it's an easy read. It's not. It's very traumatic and very intense, but it is very accessible. Like, it's not challenging intellectually. That sounds like such a pretentious thing to say, but that's a good thing. It knew what its audience was, and it knew how to attract that audience. I just personally maybe think I was not the audience. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about romance books. This was not the one to convince me of it. Although it's hardly a romance book, it's not romantic. And again, Colleen, maybe advertise it as that, because this could be insanely triggering to someone who has been through something like this and picks up your book. So like, don't be an asshole. The next book I picked up, and I don't even want to say it. I have Malibu Rising here. My friend currently is borrowing my edition of Seven Husbands by Evelyn Hugo, which I loved. So of course, naturally, as a Taylor Jenkins Reid warrior at this point, I picked up Daisy Jones and the Six. And I ended up DNFing it, and it still makes me want to cry when I think about it. This book, it was set up to be everything that I wanted it to be, okay? It's about musicians, it's about the music industry, it's written in a really cool format, it's Taylor Jenkins Reid. And yet, I felt nothing. I got about, like, genuinely about halfway through. I want to say about halfway through. And I felt nothing for the characters. I had no interest to find out what happened to them next. I had no interest to keep reading. Like, I really didn't. And I was like, I don't understand, because I hear so many people say that they were so gripped by this, they read it all in a day, they didn't want to stop, they were like instantly in it. So I don't know why I was like, actually had no drive, no power, as Dwayne Johnson would say, to read this book. I understand it must just be me, because this is such a loved book by Taylor Jenkins Reid fans specifically, and I am a big fan of her writing. I think it's really easy, I think it's really, really gripping. I think that, like, she knows how to write a compelling story, especially, like, characters. Like, most of her stories are specifically character based. So why the hell didn't this work for me? I don't know. Also, I know there is a TV show coming, so I'm definitely going to watch that and think maybe that can motivate me more, because when you kind of know what's going to happen, it's not, you know, it's not as taxing, I guess, to read. So I'm definitely going to watch the show. Definitely going to try again one day, I guess, because everyone loves this book and I hate missing out on things, you know? So yeah, I quit on that book just before I went on holiday. As I said, I went to Florida for 2 weeks to go to Disney World, and the next book I was so excited about, and I picked it up to bring away with me because it's really big. So I thought, if I end up, God forbid, in isolation or on a long plane ride, which I was, I could read this. So, One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. If you don't know, this book is about August, who moves to New York City and sees a girl, the same girl wearing the same thing on the train every single day at the same time. And they get to talking, they get to a little bit flirting, and eventually she finds out that Jane cannot get off this train. She is there every single day. Whatever time you get on the train, she's still there, wearing the exact same clothes, doing the exact same things, and she's basically stuck in like a time thing. Like, she is from the 70s, stuck on this train, forgetting every week how long she's been on this train. That was a terrible explanation. But yeah, that is the plot of this book, which is very unconventional for a romance, very interesting for a romance. I never read Red, White and Royal Blue. I have no interest to read shit about royal characters, but she's a really good author, so maybe I will. But here's the thing. Here's what happened, and again, this pains me to say. I started reading this when I left. I didn't get that far through because I wasn't reading that much. I was in Disney World, like I didn't have that much spare time. But I was really, really enjoying what I was reading. She is clearly a really good writer, and specifically for romance, I think, especially often with queer books, I think there is a very fine line between being trendy and like current and understanding queer people in queer spaces, and being very cringy. And she did a really good job of not tearing over that line. There was obviously a few bits where I was a bit like, okay, but for the most part I was actually laughing and I was enjoying it, because I was like, these people actually sound like my queer friends. And I actually, even, as you can see, I have a little thingy in here where I kept note of a paragraph I really liked. I think it was this one here. This is on page 164, 165 if you're interested. I'm not gonna read it out, but I was really enjoying it, and then I just got in a slump. I got, again, this is the common theme. This is a large book, right? This is how many pages? 422 pages. That's a large book for especially a romance. And I got, again, about halfway through. I was like 250 pages into this, and I felt like there was no progression. Like, I was really enjoying everything I was reading. The writing was really good. The story was still compelling, but it was like the romance hadn't... we're that far in. They haven't yet explicitly said that they're into each other, really. But yeah, like the whole, you know, finding out why she's there, what happened to her, that did not... it hadn't really been progressing. It was like they were kind of finding out more stuff. But I was like, how have we got another 200 pages with this, you know? Like, what what can happen for 200 pages? Like, from this point, we find out what's wrong, we fix it, you have a little smooch. I don't really know what else there is. So as I was barely reading, while I was reading this book, I decided, okay, I'm gonna put this one down, and I will probably have more likely to pick this up again than Daisy Jones and the Six, to be honest. But again, it's fucking big boy for a romance, isn't it? It ends with us as about half of this book, and I still struggled. If you read this book and you think the second half is worth it, is compelling, please let me know, because I did really love it. Like, up to where I got, I did love it, but I wasn't picking it up anymore. I didn't have that drive to read, so I was like, okay, I need to stop. And what I did when I stopped was I read Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Oh, Coraline. This is the first book that I am doing as part of the 12 books, 12 friends, 12 months challenge, where I get 12 different friends to recommend me a book for every month of the year. And this was January's, and this was recommended to me by my friend Luke. Thank you so much. It's her favourite movie, and it's one of my favourite movies, so I was absolutely enthralled to read this. And the illustrations in this copy are by Chris Riddle. And Chris, I love you. I have some history with your books, but this is not what Coraline looks like or is even described like in the book. Like, I'm pretty sure he was just going for like the purple theme here, but it's a little strange because I saw this and I thought, oh my god, the movie must have, you know, strayed away from the book in that sense and just gave her this more poignant look of the blue hair and the yellow rain jacket. No, in the book she is also described as having a yellow rain jacket. Hi, it's me in the future. This was a lie. This was misinformation. In the book she's described as having a blue jacket with yellow Wellington boots, welly boots if you will, and so the movie does change it, but the book cover is still wrong. So I lied, but not really. This is probably the closest movie book adaptation I've ever read. Like, I was shocked that almost every single scene in this book was in the movie, and the movie didn't have many extra scenes at all, which is crazy because it's such an intensely artistic movie that it's like kind of baffling that it didn't even have to stray that far from the material. The few notable changes that there were was, first of all, there's no Wybie. I said Wiley. And I'm entirely embarrassed about it. I don't know who Wiley is, but it's Wybie. There's no Wybie. She doesn't have any sidekick in the book. It's just her on her own, which gave the book a much more kind of Alice in Wonderland feel, which, if you know me, you know that's one of her books of all time. Like, that's my personality trait. So I love that. I love middle grade or children's books about like a young girl on an adventure by herself. I love that shit. I eat it up. So I really enjoyed that, actually, although Wiley is a very great addition. Some other differences where the dogs can actually talk in the book, you know, like the little Scotty dogs. In the movie, I'm pretty sure they just bark, but in the book they actually talk to her when she's in the theatre sequence. Also, there's a scene at the end where the dad has morphed into like a kind of beast and he's locked in the cellar and he's trying to help Coraline when she's chucked down into the cellar, and it's really disturbing. It's like this really dark, just like open space, and the dad is like saying, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want to do this, whilst trying to kill her, which kind of happens in the movie but not nearly as disturbing as it was described in here, which is incredible. Speaking of terrifying, the illustrations in here were certainly something. I mean, just in general, Coraline is very scary for like a middle grade story, but I mean, Jesus Christ, that could haunt me. And I've seen things. If you've seen the movie and you're not that bothered, it is very similar, but there is still some differences that are fun to find out when you read the book. So yeah, I recommend. I love well-written middle grade. I love creepy middle grade. I love well-written children's stories. Anything that is like meant for kids, but is really well written and has stuff for adults. I love that. The next thing I decided to pick up was The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis, one of them. Listen, first of all, we do not stan movie or TV covers, but if you're gonna have one, have Anya Taylor-Joy on the book cover. Like, I'm not that mad. As you may know, and as it lets you know, in a non-sticker, so I can't even get it off, this is a Netflix show now, and I love this show so much. I watched it like 3 times now, which is pretty sad considering it's like 9 hours or something like that. But for me personally, and again, I am like alone in this, I feel, I did not think reading this really added much. Like, for me personally, I have read so many 5-star reviews of this book from people who watched the show and then read the book and thought they gained so much more from it, but there really wasn't many differences. But the differences that were there was things from the show that were lacking from the book that I liked. So if you don't know what The Queen's Gambit is about, it's about Beth Harmon, who is an orphan who learns to play chess and very quickly discovers she is a bit of a chess prodigy, deals with alcoholism and addiction throughout her life whilst being this kind of chess prodigy, trying to fight against the best chess players in the world. Fight is not the best word. Trying to play against the best chess players in the world, whilst dealing with addiction and grief and all this stuff. I feel like there was a lot more in the book than I kind of gave credit for. There's a lot of stuff about self-identity. She struggles a lot with being kind of one of the only women in chess, but not wanting to be defined by that, and also just maintaining success and how being so successful as like a child like impacts your identity and your self-worth if you can't always be the best, you know? There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. It definitely showed a lot more in the book that it was written a little while ago. I'm pretty sure this was written in the 50s. Also, it's the day I got it, it fell out of my bag, as did my glass water bottle, which shattered everywhere and gave this book water damage immediately after I bought it. Oh, never mind. This was written in the 80s. Why did I think the 50s? I was gonna say 80s and then I was like, I'm lowballing. No, it was written in the 80s. There is definitely the use of the N-word occasionally, very, very occasionally, from a black character, but this is a white author, so if you've seen the show, Jolene is the only black character, and in the book she's written so much more stereotypical than in the show. I'm not trying to say, you know, black characters shouldn't be written with a certain vernacular as being inherently racist, but it was like the only character in the whole book who spoke like this was the only black character, while continually bringing up that she was black and like these weird like racism jokes written by this white guy, and it was the tone was a little weird. Yeah, it's just something I picked up, and if you are comfortable with that sort of stuff, just be aware. She is also the character at the start of the book, and this is not in the show, who does pretty much sexually assault her as a child. She is like a few years older than her and she sexually assaults her, and it's never brought up again. So it was really disturbing to read, and then they never addressed it, and it kind of tarnished Jolene's character forever. The writing is really good, the story is really compelling. Obviously I love the show because the story is really good. I think just if you have seen the show and you weren't passionately wanting to read the book, you don't have to. The whole Paris bit, which is one of my favourite episodes in the show, is completely different, and she doesn't even, this is a spoiler for the show, skip forward 10 seconds, I'll say it real quick, but she doesn't even like relapse in Paris and like go to Borgov's game all fucked up and like sleep with that girl. None of that happens, none of it. But anyway, yeah, I definitely think the things that were missing from the book that were added into the TV show I actually enjoyed more. then the very limited, if any, I don't even know if there was any scene in this whole book that wasn't in the show. I don't even think there was. If there was, it was like one, and I have already forgotten. Also, you know, you kind of expect with a book to be able to have go more in depth into the things that she was struggling with in the show. Like, the thing I always love about books above TV shows is you really get into their head, you really know their issues more, you know how they react more internally, you know what they're thinking. Yeah, just the different things that she kind of grapples with in the show that I was really looking forward to getting a more insightful, a more nuanced look into what those were like in her head. It didn't happen too much. There was obviously some scenes where I'm like, oh, she was actually thinking that, where you could have outwardly couldn't, you know, tell maybe as much in the show, but Anya Taylor-Joy is such a good actress that you kind of always could. All the stuff about her relationship to her body and sexuality, which is such a big thing. Yeah, it wasn't really explored as much as I would have hoped. I feel like so much stuff was left very open, very unlike therapized, if you will. Like, not that that's the purpose of the book, but it talks about so many complex issues and doesn't bother to be complex about them at all. You can skip it if you love the show, but if you're interested in reading the book, it could be very valuable to you because a lot of people have had that experience. The final book that I read in February, I know this is really grim for 2 months of reading. I promise I'm already doing better. It's just been a very slow few months. The last book I read was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I loved this book in high school, or at least I remember really enjoying it, and I always told people that I loved The Great Gatsby. And so I was like, I need to reread this. Like, it's been years, I need to get my fingers on this again, and it was even better. It was even better. If you don't know what The Great Gatsby's about, for some reason, it's about New York in the 1920s, and resident of East Egg, Jay Gatsby, throws these huge parties every weekend. So many people come from all around, all the rich people come, and he is kind of like an enigma. No one really knows anything about him. They are constantly making up rumours about him. He's a very complicated, mysterious man, and our narrator Nick gets involved in a friendship with Gatsby. He is very, I would say, to a homoerotic level, observant of Gatsby and interested in him. And it follows the trials and tribulations of the rich and all of the minute but huge things that they tamper with in the daily. Hi, me again. I totally forgot to say that, like, Gatsby is not just about rich people situations. It's very much subtly and unsubtly about the class divide and working class people existing in and around rich people things, and like the effects of rich people's intolerance, oppressive nature upon working class people, just having the privilege and the power over working class people, and how they can get themselves so entangled in their lives basically for fun. Like, even the way rich people interact with other rich people around, like, money and status and privilege, and like even history, like the whole thing of, you know, if your money is new, it's not as good as old money. And oh, it's so good, it's so complex, and it's such a short book that it's like insane how complex it is and like how well it does. I like talking about so much different stuff just within these like conversations and situations. First of all, it's gotten so dark. My camera just crashed and I just noticed how dark it is, so sorry that the lighting has changed so dramatically throughout, but yeah, I was struggling at the start because the sentences are so dense, the language is so particular, it's so on purpose, like every single word has a meaning in the sentence, it's there for a reason, and it's so impressive. At least every 3 lines was one that would make me go, oh, how the fuck did you write that? Like, it was so well written, it's so impressive. I know that F. Scott Fitzgerald probably got away with taking credit for some things his wife contributed, so fuck that. We love Zelda's contribution to this book just as much, but because I don't know the specifics of who contributed how much, I'll just say in general, so well written, so well crafted, and obviously the exploration into character in this book is incredible. Every character, again, it's such like a real person, like they are so personified, they have such personality. There's so much that I just want to say about this book that I forgot to say, but I'll just be quick. Just like, I love Gatsby like as a character, like not as a person, but as a character so much. Like I find him so interesting because he's this kind of like huge mystery, kind of like topic of conversation, and yet he is so insecure and he is so untrusting and he's a little pathetic. Like he is not this like, oh, my cat is there, just, he's almost very like sought after and very like, he's almost become like a bit of a legend. Like, you know, you would hear about Gatsby's parties and all this, but he's actually like kind of just like this sad lonely man. I love it. And I also I think just the whole demonstration of how rich people can kind of play with working class people's lives for fun is just so, it's so good. Like it's so, I will be forever greatly impressed by this book. I actually am excited to read it again and annotate it. I have let me see if I can guesstimate where this is. It could be this one. It fucking was. I originally bought this version because I loved the OG cover, and I got it used. I got all my books used, and it came with someone's annotations in it for only the first 2 pages, but if that's my only copy, I don't want this on it, so I also bought this copy, which again, loved the cover. So this is my like to keep copy, and this is the one I read, and this is the one I plan to annotate as well. The first 2 pages belong to the random high school or uni student whose this was, and I'm gonna annotate in this because there's so much to get my grippy little paws on in here. But yeah, if you haven't read The Great Gatsby or haven't in ages, genuinely do yourself a favour and read this because it is so good. It's so good. And yeah, those are the books I've read so far this year. I hope to do this as often as I feel like it, hopefully every month, but if not, that's okay, because I like to talk about books a lot. This video is absurdly long, like, we know, babe. Right now, if you're interested, sneak peek for the next video, I'm reading The Never-Ending Story by Michael Onday, which is the next book in the 12 Months, 12 Friends thing. This was recommended by my friend Louie, and I'm loving it so far. So good. I've never seen the film, but I'm obsessed with this like woodland fantasy thing. It's incredible so far. So yeah, very exciting. I hope this was enjoyable in any way, and you have a great day or night. I do have a Goodreads and a Storygraph. I'm pretty sure you can actually like write a new username, so I'll link it in the description. And the only people watching this are people that will already have me on there, but I thought I should say. And I also have a book Instagram you didn't know, so enjoy those things, and I genuinely hope you have a great day.